streaming. There you go. Streaming always helps. Streaming's a good thing. All right, so we are streaming and we are live. If anyone happens to hear this early on, we only started streaming simply because we know that under the new software, it takes some time to get folks, their notifications and all that. So we're just kind of chit-chatting as we get the show all revved up and everything. So, Chick, can you hear me loud and clear?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, excellent. I threw up I put I put an article up here I thought was interesting is one of the things we could talk about. The universe may have quantum properties itself, meaning the universe at a larger scale other than the quantum scale may have a something like a superposition. I thought that's something we could talk about a little bit later. Hello, everyone. Everyone's showing up here. Thank you so much for showing up. All right, good to see everyone in the chat. Hopefully we sound okay. Let us know if there's any discrepancy between my and hey Buster, thanks for showing up, between my and Chick's voice. If someone's off, I'll kind of modulate the mic. But we're just kind of doing some small talk here. So Chick, like we were talking about before we, sounds good, excellent. Well, let's wait to hear and see how Chick is against my voice. So Chick,
Yeah.
what are you thinking about, the channel thing? Do you think it's a whole lot about nothing for channels like ourselves, or do you think that there may be a larger purge afoot on the internet and everything?
Oh, I think there's definitely going to be a large purge of channels, and according to YouTube, that it's going to be from December the 10th onwards. So
Mm-hmm.
that'll be quite a bunch of people, I suppose, that'll be in the middle of their Vlogmas and trying to get their YouTube payments for Christmas and stuff, and they're going to be like literally deleted over the
Mm-hmm.
Christmas season. So it's not very nice.
Yeah.
Um, I don't see any as in like on the one side of it, the child protection stuff, I think that's one set of arguments, and then the other half of the channels that are up for deletion are just the ones that are not commercially viable. And that was when YouTube updated its policies, like its terms and services. Part of the language in there was that YouTube is under no obligation to be a platform for anyone's channel,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
also any channel that is no longer commercially viable is up for deletion. So I mean, especially for channels like mine, that there's no commercial value because I don't run any ads, so they're not making any money off of my channel. I'm kind of thinking it's going to end up being deleted. And I've gone back and forth of almost pushing that monetization button to just save my channel, but I'm just like, I just can't stand the idea of signing an agreement and becoming Susan Wojciki's employee.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, I want to save my channel, but you disgust me so much. I just can't do this.
Well, before we get thrown off for that,
Oh yeah, yeah.
I know that when I signed, because I did monetize right away. When I signed the agreement, you're basically you're not an employee. What you are is a contractor. So you're a kind of self-employed contractor. And
But
when you,
they've updated it to say that you're a YouTube partner and that you
yeah,
have to basically work for them. I'm just
mm,
looking at the language of the updated policy, not like the old school
cool.
policy. Because the old school policy, I probably should have done it. I was more in agreement with that, but it's just the very newest version of monetization is they have a lot of hold over you, what you can and can't say, and can and can't think, and can and can't do. And also then they're watching over, what are you saying, is it commercially viable? If it's not, then you're not acting in the interests of the company. So even though, yes, you're an independent contractor, you need to look out for what's the interest of the company. So you're basically working for the company.
Right. Okay, so I guess everybody, I made the announcement here. We're getting close to the time. I think we've got most of the core people on, Chick. I'm checking right now. We're just trying to, I know it takes some time for notifications to go out, and I know it takes some time for folks to kind of jump on and get acquainted with this new software. Well, certainly on our side to get acquainted with the new software, but apparently there are some issues with notifications and some other things where so now we come on a little bit early so we can kind of have people can have time to get situated and get comfortable and start the show a bit early. I know it's still on my time, East Coast time, it's 4:22, but I see no reason why not to jump into it because we've got it looks like most of the core crew that shows up week after week. So Chick, I'm excited. It's gonna be next week. My interview with the director of the Mandela Effect movie. I'm pretty stoked about that. And what do you just your impressions on the movie and your impressions on the interview, and what do you think?
Well, I've only seen the commercials so far. I haven't seen the movie yet,
Mm-hmm.
so I
Mm-hmm.
want to like reserve myself to like actually sit down and watch the movie
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because especially having been someone that said, "Oh, everyone needs to wait and watch like the Joker movie before they say what it's actually about." I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
do the same thing on myself. I'm not gonna say what I think until I actually sit down and watch the Mandela Effect movie. But I think it's so cool that you're getting to interview him and just see like what's his view on the Mandela Effect, or what does he think. So I'm really looking forward to hearing that interview.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too because, you know, of all the segments of the population that have been affected by the Mandela effect in terms of the outward appearance, certainly Hollywood and the film industry, a large portion of this phenomena is happened, to film and it's happened to movies. So certainly I'm sure the attention of filmmakers and I'm sure the attention of studios. I'm sure David Guy Levy. I would be certainly surprised from the interviews that I've seen. Talking about the movie so far, that it would be something that he wouldn't be interested in because it looks like he's very interested in it. And it was talking more from the interviews that I've seen so far and the research I've done so far about this particular movie and about I don't know if I call him on a first name basis David, but Mr. Levy. It sounds like they're, which is really kind of cool that they're that they're going the route so far that they're going in terms of the scientific basis and in terms of the ideas that he's given in earlier interviews. So I'm going to follow up with that. I'll get a set of questions about the quantum aspects and whether or not the multiverse can fit into that, because I haven't seen the movie. I know that there was a preview, there has been previews of the movie in Los Angeles and in Austin, but I don't live in either of those cities. So it'll be interesting to get that kind of perspective if there's other undertones there that might be inside the movie itself. So I guess it's kind of a wait and see kind of thing, but that even kind of builds and adds to it as well, so, for the crew here in the chat. So I'm kind of stoked on it. I'm really stoked, and I'm certainly going to be I'm going to try to represent the channel and certainly try to represent myself and everyone else and on the crew, but also too I want to I'm not going to be I'm not going to be I want to be a welcoming host because one, I was raised to not be rude, and also two, I can understand the creative process is something that's incredibly painful and difficult, and you put your life and your blood and your sweat and tears into something like this, and there's no and you do the best you can with what you have. So that's the way that I feel about it.
I hear you. Oh my gosh, did you see any weird things going on this week after the last couple of shifts?
Well, oh yeah, if you want to, yeah, definitely. I'm starting to see more and more, and again, I think this all ties together. If we get back to our core, we get back to our roots, and we start talking gateway, and we get back to the gateway process. I see a real ramping up again, and no one's paying attention. New York Times articles, all kinds of things again. to the Stars Academy. I think this signals a new paradigm and willingness by some of the governments to recognize data for what it is and begin to have the conversation that needs to be had. And that was Luis Elizondo and Tom DeLong. And I think that they're starting to talk about a potential ramping up in the coming months, or maybe a month or something like that, of the UAP UFO uh, not disclosure, but the confirmation process. So yeah, I think along with the Schumann thing we talked about, the Schumann calendar that's out there, that's really important. All of the new information in terms of the quantum the quantum universe itself, and the quantum effects that we have, sort of the Schrodinger's cat effect happening at something at a broader level, almost at the universal level, which is kind of alluded to on the front screen here. So I think it was, for me this week, myself personally, it was more of a deluge of information rather than personal MEs. But me and my sandwich story, that's enough to ripple out for weeks for myself, so I'm good on that front. But yeah, that's what it's been for me.
I hear you. I've definitely seen some changes, and I've seen like Mandela effect channels like actually putting out some changes, which usually I don't get, suggests or anything, but this time I did. So I was really glad. I was clicking on all the different videos to see all the things that had changed. And something that really caught my eye was Mandela effect had posted that the Christ the Redeemer statue had changed again, because it had changed several times, as
Mm-hmm.
in like there was a reality residue of it being much smaller. Like a photograph survived back in 2016 of like Princess Diana visiting the Christ the Redeemer statue, and it was way smaller. And then all of a sudden it was way, way bigger, and then its arms were in different positions and all this kind of stuff. Well, now the statue is completely different than what it looked like before, and its face is so, so different. So one of the things is apparently you can go up into the statue, like almost like the Statue of Liberty. Like there's a stairs inside of it, and you can go up inside of it and go stand on his head, which is really mad. And also, it like to get back to the face on the Christ the Redeemer statue right now
Mm-hmm.
looks so much like the CGI face of the occulted Christ in My Pet Goat 2. It
Really?
really does. It's so weird. Even when you look at it, you're just like, that style of like how they carved it out is so weird. Like it's not like something I've ever really seen on a statue before. I think it's like the first kind of time I've seen something where I'm just like, this could be something that was designed in CGI and just like copied and pasted into reality. It's so, so bizarre. I was posting that last night on Twitter, and a whole bunch of people were like, agreeing and looking at the two pictures, and thinking about the similarities and the differences. And I was just like, it's so strange, because the Notre Dame, when it fell exactly the same way as the My Pet Goat cathedral did. Like people were playing the two videos side by side, and the way it like implodes and falls down is exactly the same, the spires and everything,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is crazy because My Pet Goat was from like 2012, and the Notre Dame didn't fall until recently. And now this thing with like Christ the Redeemer suddenly looks like this Christ, like I said, occulted Christ, because you're not really sure which way to take this kind of figure. Like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it is open to interpretation, and a lot of it is kind of like molded, as in it's almost like a dreamscape and a reality at the same time. It's a very strange but very kind of cool way of looking at like all the events that lead up to what I suppose a lot of people would call the event, when apparently everything is going to change. And I'm still very confused about what I think the event is. I'm just trying to research as much as I can, try and figure it out. But I think we all know something crazy is coming up. We're just not sure what.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's a sense of buildup. And oftentimes I say that, I try to, abate my fears or abate the fears of others, because oftentimes we can go back 10 years, oftentimes we can go back, 5 years, and people feel like there was something on the horizon. But like we talk about with 2012, it doesn't have to always be something, oftentimes now we're realizing, Chick, and we've brought this up over and over again, the most important events you usually realize are in retrospect. So I just put up the Schumann resonance calendar that just came out on Twitter. I hope you can see it. And I think one of the tools that perhaps that will help us align all of these things would be a Schumann resonance calendar and capturing these images here. So when we go backwards, like you're talking the Christ the Redeemer statue, you're able to maybe when a group of people start to notice these kinds of things, or maybe you on an individual basis, I mean, not just Chick, but anybody in the chat, you start to notice these kinds of things, you're perhaps you could go back to these kinds of calendars and see what was going on inside of the Schumann resonance and see, what was happening on that particular day or whatever. But I think definitely, obviously, things like that have a broader ripple in the mass consciousness, figurehead kinds of things, religious kinds of things. Obviously, they're gonna be important and grab the attention, and they're something that are going to be noticed by everyone immediately. So, and if you get back to some of the core properties that we've investigated over the last year or so, all three of us, me, you, well, really even folks that have sent us really important things from the chat, but me, you, and Buster, if consciousness comes before matter, and it's all starting to point that way, certainly it's all about changing, and we've said it over and over again, the perception, the way you interact with your consciousness. Because I'm to the point, Chick, that I'm thinking that consciousness and the soul and reality, as we used to see it here, as a subjective outfit, as a subjective theater, I'm starting to see even now consciousness itself as almost as the interface representation between the theater of reality and that thing which is undefinable that we call the soul. So that interface itself is what we call consciousness, and that's the thing that everyone is in battle for. That's the battle there, is that interface itself. And then obviously we talk about the never-ending present. We talk about those kind of features that you would find in other theosophy or even parts of the Bible, not worrying about tomorrow and all of those other things. And yet we have this illusion of the past and this illusion that it's being changed. Now, if you have something that was created long, long, long ago before any of us was here, and it gave that illusion of a past, a present, and a future, and then we all bought into it long before any of us were here. And then suddenly we're aligned with this interface and the way that this interface works with the theater of reality, which is more or less exactly that, a play. It's something that isn't exactly real. And then you have this thing that's really ourselves, that middle tier interface, that thing that is able to interpret, and someone sent me this video on how eyes, if you close one eye, it sees colors differently, and it's all things we know. It sees, depth perception very differently, your left and right eye, and what they have to do is lay over top of one another, and this is very basic information, but it's sort of perfect parable for what exactly we talk about with this reality. And if you miss one eye, then your perception of the world is very, very different from the perception of everyone else. So if you take the idea, the parable of the eye, and or the metaphor of the eye, or whatever you want to call it, and you lay it over top of something of that interface that we call ourselves, I am SMQ, you are Chick, Buster is Buster, and that interface between the metaphysical and the physical world, if you're able to get to that first before we even know it's been gotten to, then that's where the control is taken. And I think that's why things like film and these other things that people kind of push away and brush off as something not important, that's not the case at all. and then something massive like Christ the Redeemer. Something like that is important. Something like I Pet Goat. Just the fact that it's put in there is guiding you. You know, people talk about that event that happened in New York City back in the early 2000s. I can't say the date, but you know, we look back almost like in a retrospective, and people who want to find occulted items with that particular date, you know, of course you're going to be able to find those things because you're the shaper of your own reality. Anyway.
I was just going to say also, just thinking about what you were saying there with, you have one eye, you see one particular perception, you have two, and then they overlay and you get a different look at what the of what you're perceiving. And then when the Mandela effect happened, that we got rods and cones, like literally rods and cones for picking up light and color in the area of the third eye, like underneath your skin. Anyone can Google that if they want to. Then it's kind of signaling to me that we're getting more and more eyes, so to speak, so that we can actually see what's going on in front of us. I think maybe we were in a kingdom of the blind kind of situation where we didn't know what we were missing or what we were supposed to be seeing or not seeing, and now all of a sudden I think we're seeing in a very short space of time more than we've ever seen before. Because like I feel like the Mandela effect is like the most massive reality revelation that I've ever come across in my life. Like I had a really kind of fixed idea of what reality was and what was real and what it meant when something was real versus when something was a dream, and now all that's kind of falling apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, I think a lot of people hung on the idea. You know, the director just mentioned of the Mandela Effect movie. By the way, I'll be doing the interview coming very soon. Yeah, look at it this way: the movie's being released December 6th, and I'll be doing the interview before that, and I'll have it out before that. That's all I can say right now. But talked about simulation, and simulation theory was one of the things, and a lot of people assumed, you know, certain things when you use certain words, people I think sometimes may forget that a word can be used in many different ways. And I know oftentimes the popular handle when you say simulation theory is immediately what they think of is, you know, the 3D simulation where you put the goggles on and all of those things. But for me, simulation theory is, sure, it's about code and it's about bits and bytes and ones and zeros and all of those other things. But I also don't think that simulation theory it has to be divorced from all of the other things that you and I have talked about, all of the other things that you and I, Buster, have talked about. All of those things are a patchwork that, well, you know, they kind of mesh nicely together. I don't think that just if we are in a simulation and we do glitch out and all of those things, that it has to be something that is different, you know. And I think I just, you know, I think that when we have that shift, when we have those spikes, which we still have the calendar up right now, you know, that's when it all moves and changes, and that's when it all reorients itself. And I don't know, you know, I still think, Chick, you know, the idea of shifts and there's sort of a rearrangement, you know, even if it wasn't something that was quote unquote natural, I'm almost to a point to where I'm wondering if anything was natural and has ever been natural. And all we're really getting to is the point of understanding something broader, not accepting the reality as it was presented to you like we've talked about before, but really getting, like you're talking about, there's things falling away of the dream state and the wake state, but also talking about perhaps this idea of there being a quote natural world. Well, of course, there's a natural world in that theater of reality I talked about, and those interfaces, you know, and those interfaces, exactly. People get caught up in the metaphor and mistake it for the real thing. It's not, you know. The real thing lies back in something that you had really, your soul had desired long, long before you were even here. So, you know, it's the three phases. You have the theater of reality. You have that interface that you call yourself, which is your your personality and who you are, and then you have that ubiquitous thing we call the spirit or the soul or whatever it is. But I don't think this sort of viewfinder that we call our eyeballs, this sort of, you know, reel to reel that we have in our brains, I'm not entirely sure that there was ever anything that wasn't tampered with. You know, you can't say there's not time. Time doesn't exist. There's no past, there's no present, there's no future. And then suddenly say, oh, it's been tampered with. Well, then it's always been tampered with. If it was ever tampered with, then it always was tampered with. And then if we're the creators of our own existence, just by default of it being our own consciousness, well, then there you go. You've already answered your question. Of course it is. And you're an active participant in that process. It's just, I think that you have to take on so much responsibility for yourself that it's just too much for most people.
I think that, yeah, I think that there's a kind of a disconnect also that is maybe trying to heal itself right now, of just kind of, if it is somehow somewhere between the waking and dream state, and you're attached to this reality and somehow you are affecting it just by even seeing it, but still there are people or characters or whatever you might think in your dream wake state, whatever you want to call this, that we're going through right now, that don't seem to know that they're just playing a character. And I think it's those people that are acting as, catalysts for trying to cause all kinds of weird things to happen. Whether you believe it or not, that half of this might be stories, half of it might be real. But like the gateway process, the looking glass technology, any of these technologies where they're trying to interfere with reality itself, CERN, whatever, you have to go, okay, so those individuals, they obviously really believe that what's going on is real and that they can change it. And they also don't seem to understand that they are a lot more, they are a lot bigger than just this character that they're playing in this strange situation we find ourselves in. And I think that being, going back to the avatar idea,
Mm-hmm.
we've played more than one role in more than one world, like consciously, which is a very unusual thing. But it let us see, like, oh, okay, there's all kinds of different worlds or dreams or whatever you want to call it, realities going on, and we can have an effect in all those things. But we also understand that there's larger architecture outside of those worlds. There has to be, because there had to be a way for us to get from point A to point B. There had to be a way for us to go from Sagittarius to Orion, or to go from, wherever you're from to wherever you are right now, for
Mm-hmm.
people that are watching this at a different date and we've shifted somewhere else or something. I think maybe that's part of the realization that we're having, is that we're bigger than just one character in one world.
I like that. I like that a lot. I like the idea too that there's larger architecture happening than what we're presented with, because I really think we had a disservice happen to us over the last 100 years or so. Being a reductionist isn't good. What it's done is it's left us all in a way kind of exposed and in the worst possible way closed-minded. Um, and I like that there is, and I've heard someone talk about the occult before and magic and all of those things, and they talk about it's understanding of how to work the machinery from your consciousness, and what you're doing is you're plucking the strings of reality. Is all of that is that's all that really is. And you have to understand too, if you look at the popular mainstream, even religious language that's out there right now, and if you were to actually analyze what it's saying, you're still talking about a very ritualistic, a very, very, very occulted kind of system that really the only thing that differentiates it from anything else is that it has the corner on the market. It has the appearance of a broader legitimacy that nothing else has, simply because it had captured through conquest and the sword, any and banished, pardon the pun or the whatever it is, banished all of the other kinds of belief systems that were out there. But ultimately, even now that religion and sort of the ritualistic side of the sort of human opera that we're all a part of, even that too is on the ropes. You just see that yearning in people. They want it so bad, and that's why I think a lot of people are decrying certain aspects of particularly like the truther folks and things like that. They decry like the rise in witches or occultism and all these other things, and it's like what it is science tried its best to take the place of religion and try to take the place of that yearning that people have to understand that broader architecture that we know that isn't there but that we can't see. And when you can't quantify certain things like belief, and you can't quantify certain things to like base materials, you can't do that. You simply can't, and it can't be done. Like people were saying, taking something as massive as love, and trying to distill that down to endorphins or certain chemistry, situations inside of your brains and synapses is such a ridiculous proposition. And in doing that, you make it so much more ridiculous that it keeps changing every 10 years. That's why they have to keep updating science books. One thing that I will say about all of the old books, such as like the Bible or even occulted texts, or even, magic texts such as, the Goetia or the Picatrix or whatever it may be, or anything in Eastern philosophies, is that they didn't need changing. Now, why is that? And why was there satisfaction for so long? You see? And why were the early scientists, they had this side of them that was, again, banished from the popular perception of these scientists, like Isaac Newton. He was a full-blown occultist. So were the founding fathers of this nation, America. Most of them were deists at best. And I wouldn't say it worse, but more, they've deviated from the popular perception of them. Some of them were occultists. And it's like, the point I'm making is that there's a yearning and that science is just not filling. And that yearning goes to that architecture you simply can't see, but it is there. There's a real architecture there, and there's a thirst for it. So, just bouncing off what you were saying. Go for it.
I think that's one of the reasons why I think one of the most powerful lines I've ever heard, or powerful parts of scripture I've ever heard, is the kingdom of heaven is within. Like, that's such a powerful clue. All of this stuff out here is just distraction. For the most part, you'll find bits of truth. You'll find things that really resonate with you. You're like, yes, this is a breadcrumb that's got me going in the right direction. But a lot of it is mutual assured distraction and theater and just like nonsense. Whereas when you go inside, you're just going to find what's really inside. It's either there or it's not. And I know that people might say, well, on a literal level, how does that make sense? But if you can connect up the parts of yourself back together, because we have been, severely squashed, almost like compressed into like a zip file, and we need to be able to basically uncompress and reattach the parts of ourselves that haven't been attached for a very, very long time, even different parts of consciousness that you haven't tapped into or bothered with since childhood. You need to basically literally pull yourself back together so that you can have any kind of semblance of idea what's going on. Because if you're fractalized and your reality is fractalized and everything's fractalized and you can't figure out what's going on around you, you can't possibly get a grip on that larger architecture. And a lot of these texts and stuff try to tell you the architecture is within. Like, that's the way to navigate it. The Egyptians knew that. The Masons knew that. Christ talked about that. Like, everyone talked about that. That's why so many buildings, especially, the Egyptian mystery school buildings, were built in the shape of a man, because they knew the inside was the outside. They knew that the architecture between worlds, between dreams, between spaces, between everything was the same architecture that was within. Now, what's shaken us up enormously at this point is that our inner architecture was changed. completely against our will, and the outside world has changed and everything's changed. So we're all rattled to bits over here. And it's not that people were so dumb that they were satisfied for ages with the same texts and everything was fine. It's the literally the words that appear now in holy texts, in even books that you wouldn't consider holy texts, you consider them whatever you would, the spiritual instruction of whatever kind that you're into. The words are all changing. It's literally, to me, revelation. It's being revealed, something that literally wasn't there before. You couldn't have figured it out because it wasn't there literally to be read. It is there now. It's given you a whole brand new set of clues to try and figure out what's going on. And in a way, like, the overview I have of all this is when you have a dream and you're getting close to waking up and the dream is just getting wackier and wackier and wackier.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where I am now in my awake world. I'm like, everything's going crazy. So I know we're at the point of very soon we're going to wake up and we're going to see just a lot more of the reality that's really going on. And we're going to remember in that instant, oh, yeah, that's obvious. I always knew that. But right now, we can't figure it out for the life of ourselves because our vision is still a bit clouded. We can
Yeah.
just kind of feel that it's coming more than we can see that it's coming.
Yeah, and I think one of the if I could just further lament what you're saying and what I'm saying is that what bothers me the most is that back long before we had this dreadful dip into this reductive in scientism is that we had mystery schools, we had those things that you had mentioned. We had those institutions that, whether it was Egyptian or whether it was Sumerian, or and go on and on and on and on, they would be able to tell you, look, this is what's changing. Here's the spiritual forecast for this month. And that's exactly what we're trying to pin together and recreate right now. And we don't have that. So what we're doing is we're just thrashing around in the dark right now, trying to figure out what it all means, because we are orphans. I like the tag on my Twitter thing is an orphan of Sagittarius. I'm an orphan of many other things as well, because that lineage was broken, and I don't have that anymore. And of any kind of spiritual lineage. So I've had to cobble together different things that I find right now, because that's what you're talking about. And people will find themselves in these situations where they are, they'll open up their kundalini or things like that, and they didn't mean to. There used to be this connection where you could go to people, and it was from back before there was even cuneiform. There were people that could help you with a situation that was like that. And I think that's part of it too, is that we've reached more than full capacity in terms of our faith in the reductive materialist world. And just the fact that we've shown it on this channel over and over and over again, where science is either nakedly speculating, or they have to retract what they had said 20 years ago and completely rewrite it. Or now finally they're getting more and more honest all the time, perhaps because of the outcry, where they're saying we simply don't know and we're having to rewrite this and do it over again. Now, I've always said I love science as an idea. What I don't like is it as in the current state it's in, as an economic and a political dynasty. It's well, if the scientists say it, then it must be true. I have to listen. But over and over again, it's sort of like when the priests, well, the priest class of like the Dark Ages or the medieval period, no matter what, how absurd and decadent they got, no matter how abusive they were to their parishioners, well, you can't mess with God, so we're going to back up and let this priest continue, or this, pastor continue to abuse his parishioners. No matter what, no matter how decadent and absurd it gets. And I believe that we may be in that sort of cycle. And the problem that we don't have now is we don't have, none of us have. No one. I don't think anyone that I know on the planet, there may be a sort of unbroken sort of thread chick perhaps that's out there. I certainly don't know of anything, and certainly it hasn't been exposed to me of an unbroken thread that's come from the beginning of time, and it clearly explained to me to right this moment what this is. And yeah, scientism has produced inept shamans, Josh. Absolutely, absolutely.
I was going to say, I like science as what it's presented to be, but I don't like it as a religion,
Mm-hmm.
as a, even though we have proof that what we said before is wrong, we're not going to go with that because our university wants to keep the previous line, even though it's not in any way, it's not logical to do that if you're truly looking for truth. And I think that it's very, there was definitely a massive forced ignorance or forced darkness on us, where there are, dark and terrible things out there. Let's be real. But I think that we were told to just be afraid of everything we don't understand. When you bring up certain points, like especially too, maybe the person that's, the preacher, and they think they have it all worked out. First of all, you point out the Mandela effect and Bible changes to rattle them a bit. And second of all, you ask the pertinent questions, such as, well, were the three wise men just a bunch of Egypts that looked up at the stars?
Mm-hmm.
No, they were like Isaac Newton. They were looking into all kinds of different things. They knew specifically to look at this particular star in this particular time, at this particular formation of three stars that made up the giant star that signified the birth of, Jesus. And they knew all kinds of things that were going on. And obviously, the Earth was a lot bigger back then because it took them like 2 years to actually reach him on some timelines. I'm sure on other timelines where the Earth is really small, they were able to get there a lot faster. But my point being, a lot of things that were okay in Jesus's day and even during his lifetime, later on, the Romans, and the Romans were a bit decadent and a bit abusive kind of in the early days, and they kind of just rolled Christianity over that as a veneer, and it continued,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. But there was a lot of things that, like I said, were okay in Jesus's time, and then after Jesus's time, when the Romans got a hold of it, they said, this is terrible, that's terrible, this is terrible, that's hell, that's evil, that's this and that. And then they started, murdering people for ages with the crusades and burning people. And just, I'm just like, just literally look at what happened. You're
Yeah.
happy to murder all kinds of everybody, which Jesus did not do. I'm saying there was a spirit that came in under the guise of a person that wanted you to know what reality really was. Because, hello, Jesus was walking on water. He was making two fish, enough fish for 40 people. Like, he was showing you what reality really was. And he was like, wake up, lads, come on, get a grip. And nobody really understood him in his day. And they completely turned it into something else that, when you look at what it is now, you're just like, how on earth did you come to that conclusion? And it's just like, well, I guess humans, a lot of people are corrupt, and they put their own corruptions into what they thought goodness was. And they did a lot of, psychotic stuff. And then that turned people away. So then people went way away over to the other side to try and figure out, other sides of consciousness and reality and what was going on. And we've just been running in circles for a very long time. And I'm just like, this is not about priests or institutions or Protestants or, whatever it is that you're trying to run around to. I honestly think that, truth is, you need to find that inner architecture. You need to find what's truly going on, and the truth is within. I think that all this stuff, the more and more that I think about it, is I'm just like, it's all the mutually assured distraction that I talked about before, is that there's so much out here that looks promising but then just ends up being drama or being just fluff and nonsense.
Well, and I think also too, a lot of people really say they want the truth, but I don't think they really do. I don't. I don't think a lot of people, I would say the vast, I would say about 99% of the population probably actually doesn't want the truth. Also, too, I think I always talk about the hard sciences, like we talk about physics and we talk about astrophysics and we talk about, quantum physics and all these other things. But We also have to talk about some of the softer sciences as well, and that plays into kind of what you're talking about. It played over nicely from, you know, you can't say for 100 years that there is no true evil and there is no true good, and have situational morality for 100 years, and then boom, all of a sudden proclaim that there is evil and there is good whenever it suits your needs on a situational basis. You know, you look ridiculous, and the only thing you have is power, and that's the what you really have. Power is only perception. Money is only perception. All of those things, it goes back to consciousness before reality. So on the softer sciences, you don't have something like that. And again, it goes even back. It spills. It's really funny how the template, it really did stay the same. That you had kind of this situational where you say there is no good and bad, and yet somehow people can get up and say that there is good and bad when there isn't any really good and bad. It's it's a strange dichotomy that you're not meant to understand. You're not even, don't try to unravel it because you're not meant to. It's a device, it's a very important machine and device that you're not supposed to understand. You're not even supposed to recognize its existence. Just to know that it exists is dangerous. And then to say something about it is paramount to dangerous. Is paramount to a coup d'etat. So the important part is that that's what that was. Is you had people who claimed to be absolutist for the longest time, and they wore that out to say there is absolute good and absolute evil. There is God, there is Satan. Once that was up and it was ready for overthrow time, then they said, confused the crowd by saying, oh, whoa, it's all relative. It's all gray. It's shades of gray. There isn't really evil. There isn't really good. There's a bit of both in everything and in every one of us. But by using that too, then you can't say then, oh, then this is evil or this is forbidden or this is bad. You can't do that. And I think that gets back to the idea of science or even religion as an idea versus how it's actually executed as, again, as a social or economic or a political system. And that's the difference. I love the idea of science because I love the idea of trying scientific things and doing it over and over again and getting new information by trying these results and being able to, repeat it over and over again. I like that idea. But in terms of it's how it's being created and all it has to show for itself is technology. And to say, well, it has medicines now. There's medicine and clean water and all of these other things that, if you were to, like I said, it's a matter of pain versus pleasure. If you were to think about all the pain that it has caused versus the pleasure, would the ledger, the sort of galactic ledger, would it balance out from reductive materialism? And you have to include all of it. That would include World War II and all of the philosophies that were spawned from faithless philosophies. Because it's not just the fact that it cleans water and that you have medicines that will cure you of foods that are mass produced to make you sick anyway. It's not about that. You have to take in a holistic approach to the pain that it has caused, and you have to take a holistic approach to the pleasure and to the comfort that it has created. And not all of that came from the last 150 years when science became the dominant paradigm. It became the dominant religion that everyone bowed to. No, 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 no. There was a long time before that. Where it couldn't claim that. I mean, we had the Roman aqueducts well before Darwin. So I'm not entirely sure that there's just so many pieces to all of these things, and I don't know how we found ourselves here this week, but one thing I do know is that Schumann calendar is really cool looking, and I think it's going to help us out a lot, Chick.
I think so. There were a lot of interesting things going on with the Schumann resonance in that the actual Schumann resonance bot account, even though it says bot, there's actually a person that runs it.
Mm-hmm.
The person that runs it kept insisting, because I was asking them about the blackouts. Oh, it's just the equipment malfunction. It's just equipment malfunction. And then we got a really interesting reading. I think it was on the 17th, but it was very recent, and it showed that it wasn't that the equipment was just shutting off, because it was like a blackout, but it was like a really low reading that had a spike right in the middle. I'm looking for it right now. I think it was November 17th. I'll retweet it on my Twitter for anyone that wants to see it.
Hmm.
Um, and certainly that was proof enough for me that no, it's literally just at points now the Schumann resonance is dipping so low that it's not able to be measured, on the graph, that they're the lowest point at which they measure it from, it's dipping down lower than that. So it's not that it's turning off. And I thought that that was huge. Okay, no, sorry, I was wrong. The 26th of the 11th, 2019,
Hmm.
and I'm retweeting that right now. Excuse me, coughing over here.
Hmm.
It's You can clearly see that there's a blackout, but there's a shadow of a Schumann resonance blip, and you can see kind of in the darkness of the black, you can see little blue lines of where it's just very lowly reading. So it's just like, okay, we're having massive spikes that are way off the charts, that are like whiteouts,
Hmm.
and then we have these massive dips that are like blackouts. So it just shows an extreme waveform in the Schumann resonance.
Can you
And
send that over to me? And what I can
oh
do
yeah,
is
let
I'll
me
put that up here.
I'll send direct message to you so that everybody can see what I'm talking about instead of just me like miming it out. And you can see there on the 26th, just how crazy that looks and how awesome that is. That now we finally have proof that it's not just,
All
it's
right.
not just malfunctioning equipment. We really are having a very cool situation here.
All right. Let me putting this together on the fly here. All right. We got that. So back to this idea of they're saying the universe can have some quantum properties to it at that level, which could play into our Schumann spikes, which would make more sense. If is this what you're talking about? 1128 here. There. Oh, let me see. Let me go
So
back.
if you click the blue part of the graph,
There you go. I got it. There we go. Boom. We got it.
the other one.
Yep.
There you go. You can see in the middle of the blackout that there's a spike, and there's
Yep.
also a visible dip.
Wow. That is
So it's
interesting.
not shutting off, because you can see like those little blue lines like fade so gradually into the darkness that they exist the whole way there. So it's just like, no, these are just extreme dips. And it's difficult to know what all encompassing is going on within the Schumann resonance. But a lot of people say, it's the heartbeat of the earth, or it's a very important frequency for consciousness and for living things. Because when your brain waves dip very low during sleep, they start to match some of the Schumann resonance frequencies. So it is a hugely important part of being alive, I think, as much as the tides and the moon used to be. Whereas this, we can see now that we're on the edge of something really crazy happening, because the spikes and blackouts, as you could just see from that sample calendar that SMQ showed you earlier, that's typical now. The entire year has been really, really crazy for blackouts and whiteouts.
Hmm. Yeah, and the spikes, it would be interesting to see, 20 years ago, or the 90s. What if we could see what the Schumann resonance looked like back then? Because, like I have here September now, September 20th. Look at that spike. September, or actually, this was August 30th. You can see that spike. Um, the 30th of September, you can see the spike. And you just see almost agitation all the way through the month. It's just so strange. It's really interesting. And hopefully one day something will be so glaring everyone will be able to piece it all together and go, aha, look what we have here. And it's all together. And yeah, it's really something else, isn't it? It really is. And I'm hoping that we can get another bit of data that we could cross-reference this. Obviously one bit of data would be a piece of news history. If someone could cross-reference those, or something else as well.
Yes, if there was, a sample point, or even what people have been doing to check for shifts is like posting, different colors, like different squares of colors, and seeing if those change with the shifts, and they do sometimes. I wonder if that could be correlated with the shift signature that we noticed on the Schumann resonance. That every time it has a particular waveform, there's a reality shift.
Just looking in the live chat for Ash0787. We've talked about it on the channel earlier before in the year, maybe 2 years ago. At least I can say everyone that's with this channel, and the regulars that have come and gone throughout the years here, NDEs and the Mandela effect generally in the community are known to be kind of tied together. Also, too, traumatic events tend to be tied to the Mandela effect, and I think what tends to happen when you have an NDE, or what tends to happen when you have a traumatic event. We all know that your reality changes in that oftentimes you reassess what's important to you. You reassess where you are in life and what matters the most. The reader exactly is. I think a lot of people are NDEs, and I think a lot of people have had really traumatic events happen in their lives. So and that unfortunately would be one thing a lot of people would actually use to kind of make people who believe in the Mandela effect, kind of say, hey, look, you've had a traumatic event or something, so we can't rely on you as much because of that, because there's been some kind of perhaps damage done to your psyche. But the problem is that I think, like we've expressed many times on the channel before, that's exactly what you need. You need sort of to be, that thunderclap to kind of shake you into that reality. And there's a lot of traditions, not, Western and otherwise, they want to work you into that point of frenzy. They want to work you out, in terms of being out of breath or breath exercises, or put you into a place that's really hot or really cold, or put you into different kinds of rituals so you're disoriented. And that's a form of that trauma. So it gets you out of your normal senses. And that's a very big part of a lot of the older mystery schools that were out there, or the older rituals that are known. So it's all part of our kind of human tradition. No matter what culture you're from, it's part of that. So I don't say be if you've had an NDE or if you've had a traumatic event happen to you, um, that disqualifies you. In fact, I think it qualifies you even more to listen to you and try to understand what it is you went through and then what you saw afterwards. Because for a moment, it didn't matter, or for a moment, the thing that you loved the most was it was at stake, or perhaps you even lost it. Meaning a person passed away, and it's in those moments that you can shift immediately. So that's what I'm thinking.
Well, I was going to say that I think that it is very purposeful in just in the conversation we had earlier about the larger architecture that is between realities. When you are truly in blinding pain, or you have lost someone and it has devastated you, it puts you into not just a different mindset, but you stop playing that character and believing in that character that you think you are in this, world that we're playing in here.
Mm-hmm.
When something really hits you that hardcore, like, you pull back into the center of your being, whether you realize it or not, and you either go into a different mind frame, or you're not in any particular mind frame at all. You're all feeling. And I think that when you snap out of playing that character because something has hit you so hard, it probably opens you up to being able to shift, like on a level that you wouldn't be able to if you were just, you know, I'm SMQ, or I'm chick, and I'm doing this, and I'm trying to order, the Italian sandwich and stuff, like, the everyday stuff that we do that we really believe is really happening. When you don't have all your focus and energy there because you've been massively disrupted by something, I think that puts you in a neutral enough setting as a as an energy or as an entity or as whatever you are, that you can click into something else, even if it's a very nearby timeline or whatever it is. And I think that we've seen that. We've seen that when they wanted to do like the Montauk experiments, when they wanted to do experiments to click out of reality and do all these different things, they would put people through pain and through heat and through drugs and things they didn't want to force them out of their normal mindset completely, so that they would be open to being utilized in whatever it was that they were trying to get them to do in an interreality type of way. So maybe that's why so many Mandela effect people are either NDEs or had something traumatic or something crazy go on, is that they have it maybe a few times in their life been snapped out of character and have they're aware kind of that they are bigger than just the everyday part of you that you play in this world.
Yeah, and I think, like this upcoming Mandela Effect movie, why it's so important, and I've always said with this channel why film is so important is it's one of the ways now that we tell stories with each other. We do it in a modern way, and of course we're going to do it through technology. Just like we're all talking now. This is a village. This would be the equivalent of all of us coming to the village square and talking things out about whatever it is we need to talk about, and people come and go and they move on, and some stay and some go, and whatever it is. Film in a lot of ways gives that to us. We're able to talk about it and the deeper meanings to it, or compare those meanings. And I think if there's an aspect of trauma to the Mandela Effect movie, I think it would add, and I would be very pleased to see that. And there's been hints at it that there is that, and that would be a good thing, because a lot of people say, well, that would paint him as crazy or whatever. No, if that is something that is kind of a bit of a cop out. I mean, that's the knee jerk reaction, just like whenever people say a they, because you immediately want to go to that kind of fallen state of distrust, and it's like the Mandela effect. It doesn't have to be either or. It can be in a state of superposition. It can be man-made, and it can be natural, because ultimately you've agreed to it at some level. Because reality itself is it's a sport, and it's something that takes a team to create together. So it's not as if just because you're just now finding out that reality itself, you're finding out that the way it was the way that it was presented to you isn't exactly the way it actually works. Doesn't mean that you were brainwashed, or that you were duped in some way. Perhaps they're also finding out as well, and they just happen to have a year, 10 years, 20 years ahead of you. That's all. And they've already wrote the papers. They're out in FOIA requests, and no one's reading them, or no one bothers to look. Who knows? And it doesn't have to be anything negative. It doesn't. It just means other people have gone farther than you. It's just strange that it has to immediately go to a conspiratorial place where it's a Mandela effect. Oh my God, it's got to be CERN. Oh my God, it's got to be negative. It doesn't have to be negative. Life is messy. So what if the painting is messy? Maybe the framework that the painting is held in, it's also messy as well. So what? Oh, well, it must be our bad memories. Well, if consciousness comes before reality, then your bad memory is the consciousness, is the reality. It is the reality. And to separate the two is foolish. There is no separation of the two. It is Schrodinger's cat, and they're already proving it. Schrodinger's cat can be in a state of superposition. The universe can be in a state of superposition. You know what they're admitting when they're saying this universe can be in a state of superposition? What we've all been saying on this channel for the longest time. The gateway is right. The consciousness comes before anything else. The truth lies within. That's right. The truth is always, it's so basic. And a lot of people don't want to know it. They don't want to know the truth. They would much rather be like, no, it's them, it's they, quote unquote, or whatever it is. I don't know.
I agree. I think that like there's been so many things that have happened that have wrecked people's trust in the past, that have made them think, that there has to be kind of a negative edge to it. Like, when you get jaded, you get burned out, too many bad things have happened, you tend to go, what's the catch? What's the catch? To the point where you almost, a lot of us don't believe that there is like a good timeline where there is no catch. People
Hmm.
are very suspicious, like, where's the catch? What's going on? But I think the one thing that gave me some hope when people started to say this thing about timeline one and timeline two on the looking glass technology thing, I was like, if that is real somehow, if that is real, and we ended up on timeline one, even though we're natives of timeline two, that means that all the people that ruined our trust in the past, that were their consciousness is trapped on the other timeline, the one that's going to bits, that's in the middle of war, and there's nobody to stop us here from realizing truths and going forward. As in, like, this timeline one, as they said, is the one that's going to succeed. You're going to see the truth, you're going to get your disclosure, you're going to know what's going on. You're Nobody has got their foot on your neck anymore in this situation, as in we've been separated off into two different piles. And maybe that's even biblical, like wheat and chaff. Maybe I'm going too far with that, I don't know, but I'm just saying that a lot of different sources are telling me that on this particular timeline things are going to work out for us, and I'm suspicious. I'm like, oh, I don't know, there has to be a catch, there has to be a catch. And I was, when I first came, like in 2016 too, I was like, I'm afraid to make a YouTube channel because there's going to be a catch. We're going to get incredible backlash, and it's going to be, it's something that we can't handle, like we're going to get arrested, like that kind of level. And nothing happened. We were
Right.
allowed to talk to each other, and I was amazingly surprised by all that. Um, I think that there actually things could work out in a positive way, and I'm still like surprised about that, but thankfully in a good surprised fashion. I had another point too, but of course I've completely forgotten now.
You and your bad memory. See, that's why we can't be trusted because it's our
Can't
bad
be
memory.
trusted.
You
There you
can't.
go.
It's chick. It's your bad memory, and
Oh,
it's
you
just
just reminded me of what it was right there. Sorry. The thing that you just said about separating the consciousness from the reality is so true. And what myself and some of the other MEs had been discussing recently is, we know that there's a 7 second delay between information, coming through your eyes and going into your brain, and because everything comes into your eyes upside down and has to be turned around and has to go through the optic nerve and has to go into the brain. There's a 7 second delay between reality and between you actually seeing, and then a nanosecond, delay of you actually reacting to what's going on. And we're just saying that maybe there is something to being more in tune with like the heart and with feeling, because there's no 7 second delay if you can approach reality through that part of yourself. As in, like, people that have strong intuition, or they can feel, when there's waves of anger or sadness or waves of whatever intent coming off of other people. It's like, if you can kind of connect into your feeling, your intuition, your heart, you can bypass a lot of the super slow kind of way of dealing with reality, which was, the eyes and the mind, and thinking things through and getting all confused because you have now three hemispheres in the brain instead of just two. So instead of two brains arguing, you have three, and it's a mess. Um, but I think that what I'm trying to say anyway is that there are different ways that we can be in touch with reality that are more efficient. And I think that we're finding out that some ways of dealing with reality is kind of like 90s dial up, and other ways are like wireless broadband. And it's just trying to sharpen those senses, because that wasn't the way, there wasn't even a choice before. I think the
mm,
only kind of way, unless you were a very special person, was the old school 7 second delay between you and reality.
wow. 7 seconds, man. That's a heck of a thing. It's almost as if in that moment of that 7 second delay, if you have operator A and operator B, and they're having some sort of exchange with one another, whether it's conversation or something else. That 7 second delay is almost there if you were to go that dark city route for, you know, something to come in and have more than enough time to change the situation from what it could have been. It's my brain immediately goes back to, what do we go back to? Our stories. We go back to movies, we go back to film, and it's it's great. It's we're getting towards the end of the show, so I'm gonna make the plug for the interview again, that it's gonna be coming up this week, before the movie is out, and I hope it's a good interview. I'll be putting together questions. If you wanna send me some questions, feel free on Twitter. And I know someone chick asked about Looking Glass on Twitter, and I forgot who now. But I don't. I watched it, and I thought it was dubious at best. I'm not entirely sure I'm a believer of it, but I know someone asked me about it, and that's why I'm bringing it up. Would you mind, chick, sending that to me in messages and IMing it to me if you don't mind, and I'll send that over to somebody. I just they were asking about it, so
Sending you the video link, or
yeah. Because I've watched so many videos since then. I would have to dig through my history for who knows how long, and then I may miss it because I wouldn't recognize the thumbnail even if I saw it. I would have to, look through the thumbnail and read it and potentially open it. But anyway, when it comes out, I'll let everyone know. Please watch and listen and check it out, and it'll be great. And hopefully I'll do a good job and make everybody proud, and go and see the movie, and that way we can talk about it as a community and as kind of a village, and we can get together and see what's what, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing. And even when things are a bit overwhelming or whatever, like I said, you can take solace in the fact that everything is temporary. Nothing's forever. Nothing in your life is going, in this theater we're in. Nothing is forever. I mean, and I take a lot of solace in that, actually. So anyway, I AI_SMQ. That's me on Twitter. That's the best place to get a hold of me for potential questions. I'm putting together a list of questions I'm going to ask myself to the director, and it'll be great. So I think we're about there, chick.
yes, I'm gonna see if I can't get a hold of that movie, because I'd like to watch it before your interview comes up, because I'd like to be informed. So I'm gonna do my best to do that. As a couple of people were talking about the 7 second delay again, I was just gonna finish that point up by saying that's why when there's an emergency or something crazy is just about to happen, or you're just about to get injured, time moves differently. And
Mm.
people always go, "Oh, time it started moving really slow, and I saw the thing coming towards me," or I saw. It's because when you go up into such a high frequency, because you're in that crazy emergency mode, you start to see how slow motion everything is moving.
Mm.
So anyway, when you get outside of the speed that you normally function at, you're like, wow, everything is so slow. So yeah, everything is cyclical, so it literally has to cycle back around before you get another 7 seconds of one flash of reality. It's a really, really crazy system. But anyway, I think the interview is going to be, I think everyone is going to be tuning in. I hope you do anyway. And we'd love to hear, what the story is. And I'd like to see the movie. And we'll, thankfully, it'll open discussions about the Mandela effect again, because a lot of people who are more, not so curious, they maybe looked into it in 2016, and then they, got distracted by all the politics and all the drama and everything. Maybe they'll see this movie, they'll come around to asking more questions again, and they'll say, you know what, that is different. As in, like, the shifts that I've just seen, I see we're in JC Penney with the two E's again, or at least I am. The past 2 days, it's been JC Penney with the two E's in the word, and it's been Chick-fil-A with a K in the chick, whereas before, the 3 days ago, it was the opposite. was JC Penney with one E and it was chick with no K. So I've definitely shifted. Maybe these things will open up questions again. Maybe we'll get more people looking into reality, and that has to be a positive thing.
All right, and with that, I think that's it. That's episode, what is this, 81? Man, they're starting to rack up here. So we'll be off, and the next time you hear me, hopefully it will be with the interview, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.